The first light of dawn filtered through the acacia trees, touching the riverbank in soft, golden streaks. Amid the damp grasses, a faint sound reached Elias's ears, a low, uneven breathing that did not belong to the usual morning chorus of birds or insects. There, half hidden by the tall grass, lay a lion, its golden mane streaked with mud and dew. Its limbs twitched faintly, but the stillness of its body spoke of weakness and long, unseen suffering. Elias, an older caretaker who had spent decades moving quietly through these lands, approached slowly, mindful of the fragile tension in the air. This was not a wild encounter, this was something different. The lion, whom he had rescued as a cub many years ago, lifted its head slightly, eyes meeting his with a faint spark of recognition. There was no fear, only an acknowledgement of familiarity. A soft groan slipped past its lips, a sound carrying both fatigue and a subtle trust. "Easy, old friend," Elias whispered, voice barely louder than the river's murmur. He crouched a few feet away, careful not to disturb the fragile balance. The lion shifted slightly, tilting its head, as though answering in kind, a gesture almost human in its quiet intent. The air carried the scent of wet earth, rain-soaked foliage, and the faint, metallic tang of the river. Around them, life continued indifferent to this intimate moment. Dragonflies skimmed the water, birds called in brief, scattered notes, and the gentle wind rustled the leaves. Yet here, in this small clearing, time felt suspended. Every breath, every subtle twitch of muscle mattered. Elias studied the lion carefully. Its coat, once thick and lustrous, was dull and matted. Its ribs showed through thin fur, hinting at days without proper sustenance. The once powerful limbs now trembled under the weight of age and exhaustion. Every detail etched a story of survival and quiet endurance. He placed a small clay bowl of water a short distance away. The lion sniffed it, then lapped slowly, deliberately, each movement heavy with cautious determination. Elias remained still, watching, noting the tension in the muscles, the subtle flinch whenever the bowl touched the grass. This was a creature that had faced life and death countless times, yet now hesitated in the presence of a human, its benefactor, its constant. A slight shiver passed through the lion. Elias reached out, hands hovering but not touching, sensing the delicate line between comfort and intrusion. The morning sun climbed higher, casting gentle warmth on the pair. The river's whisper mingled with the lion's slow, uneven breathing. Elias's mind wandered briefly to the day he had found this cub, small, frightened, and trembling in a patch of scrubland. He had carried it, fed it, nurtured it back to strength. And now, years later, the roles were shifting. The animal that had once leaned on him for survival had returned in its own time, perhaps sensing that he too had grown fragile with age. A quiet understanding passed between them, unspoken yet palpable. The lion had come not for food or protection, but to simply be near the one who had given it life. And Elias, feeling the weight of that silent gesture, knew that this encounter was rare, a fleeting convergence of trust, memory, and unbroken loyalty. He remained seated, watching the lion, letting the quiet stretch between them, knowing that whatever came next, this first meeting of the morning had already marked something sacred. The world outside might carry on, but here, at the riverbank, two lives intersected in a gentle acknowledgement of years, survival, and deep, enduring bond. The lion remained still, its body pressed lightly against the damp earth as Elias moved around the clearing. Each step he took was measured, deliberate, a silent promise that he meant no harm. The lion's amber eyes followed him, unblinking, and in that gaze lay decades of shared history, a tapestry of trust woven between human and animal. Elias's thoughts drifted to the past. He remembered the day he had found the cub, alone and trembling in the scrubland. Its fur was matted with dirt, its eyes wide with fear, yet even then, there had been something resilient in its stance, a spark that refused to be extinguished. He had carried it back, tended to its wounds, and watched it grow into the powerful creature now lying before him. Time had passed in quiet increments, filled with small victories and long, patient lessons. There were mornings when the cub had been too weak to stand, nights when illness had left it listless, and days when it had run across the savannah with a freedom that seemed almost untouchable. Through all of it, the bond between them had grown, subtle and unspoken, strengthened by acts of care, attention, and mutual respect. Now, years later, the roles had shifted. Elias felt the wear of time in his joints, the faint tightness in his chest, the subtle reminder that life was fragile. And the lion, perceptive as ever, had come to recognize that fragility. It inched closer, head lowering toward his knees, eyes softening. Its ears twitched at the faintest sound, nostrils flaring as if sensing the limits of his strength. "Old friend, I've missed you," Elias murmured, voice low and warm. The lion's tail flicked once, a subtle acknowledgement, a gesture of connection that required no words. Around them, the forest seemed to pause, the usual cacophony of insects and birds reduced to a distant hum. The river flowed steadily, carrying the reflections of the tall trees and the soft morning light. The lion's breathing grew even, its body rhythmically rising and falling with the gentle swell of the grass beneath it. It had been many years since it had shown such deliberate care in its movements, and Elias felt a shiver of recognition. The animal had come with intention, aware that this was a meeting not dictated by hunger or instinct alone, but by something deeper, more profound. He reached out his hand slowly, hovering just above the lion's menere, feeling the warmth radiate through the coarse fur without making direct contact. Every small gesture mattered, each movement a bridge between their worlds, human and wild, memory and presence. The lion pressed lightly into the gesture, just enough to acknowledge it without overstating. The air carried the faint, musky scent of the lion, mingled with the fresh, earthy smell of the riverbank. Elias noticed the way the light caught in the lion's eyes, how the muscles along its flank quivered subtly with restrained energy. It was a creature alive with history, with instinct, with loyalty that defied language. For a long stretch, neither moved. They simply existed together, bound by the echo of past moments, by the quiet knowledge that one life had shaped the other in ways neither could articulate. Elias felt a deep, unspoken gratitude for survival, for recognition, for the enduring bond that had brought them to this moment. The lion shifted slightly, resting its massive head against a root-strewn patch of earth, eyes never leaving Elias. It was a silent vow, a promise of presence, of witnessing, of acknowledging the fragile heartbeat of a human who had once saved it from certain death. And in that quiet, everything else, the world, the noise, the passage of time, slipped away, leaving only two lives connected by years of unspoken understanding. The afternoon sun dipped low, painting the riverbank in warm amber tones. The lion remained close, lying along the edge of the clearing, its head occasionally lifting to track Elias's movements. Its breathing was slow, deliberate, each inhale and exhale carrying a weight that seemed to match the rhythm of his companion's own heart. There was no urgency in its presence, only a quiet, patient attentiveness. Elias settled onto a fallen log, the wood damp beneath him but comforting in its familiarity. He watched the river as it twisted lazily around smooth stones, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and foliage. Around them, the forest seemed suspended, each bird call and insect hum softened by distance. In this stillness, every minor motion, the subtle flick of an ear, the twitch of a tail, felt magnified with significance. The lion's eyes followed him as he moved slowly to collect a few fallen branches for a small fire. It remained relaxed, yet alert, every muscle taut in quiet observation. Elias realized then that this was more than a visit, it was a vigil. The lion, aware in ways that transcended human understanding, had come to witness, to accompany him in the most delicate moments of life, when presence mattered more than action. A faint wind carried the scent of distant rain, mingled with the warmth of the sun-warmed earth. Elias could feel the lion's warmth through the grass, a steady, reassuring weight. It had traveled miles, crossed terrain that would have exhausted a younger creature, yet it moved with purpose, settling near him with the knowledge that its role was simply to be present. "Rest, rest here," Elias whispered, voice soft but filled with gravity. The lion's ears flicked at the sound, and it shifted slightly, lowering its massive head onto the ground closer to him. There was a trust in that movement, a recognition that it was sharing this space not as predator or protector, but as a companion who understood the fragile arc of life. The river gurgled over stones, and insects began their evening chorus, a gentle soundtrack to their vigil. Elias watched the lion's breathing sync with the slow rise and fall of his own chest. The creature had grown old, yet in its eyes remained the intensity of a life fully experienced. He traced the outline of its menere with a careful hand, feeling the coarse texture, acknowledging the loyalty it had carried silently for years. As the sun sank lower, shadows lengthened, stretching across the clearing in stripes of gold and green. The lion's gaze remained fixed, yet soft, unblinking, a steady presence that grounded Elias in the quiet certainty of shared history. He realized that this was the culmination of countless mornings and evenings spent together. The cub that had once depended on him was now offering a gift he could not have anticipated. It was the gift of trust, of vigilance, of unwavering companionship at the edge of mortality. Elias leaned back against the log, the lion's head near his feet, and felt a deep sense of peace. Time seemed to stretch, the boundaries between species dissolving into quiet understanding. In that stillness, he felt the pulse of life not just in himself, but in the creature beside him, the shared heartbeat of two beings bound by years, respect, and memory. The evening grew cooler, the forest alive with subtle sounds, yet within their clearing nothing intruded. The lion exhaled a low rumble, almost imperceptible, and Elias responded with a faint smile, eyes closed. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, he allowed himself to simply exist, to be present, to accept the quiet vigil offered by a creature whose loyalty transcended the limits of instinct. Twilight descended over the savannah, the sky streaked with muted purples and golds, casting the riverbank in a soft, reflective light. The lion shifted closer, moving with deliberate care, until its massive head rested gently against Elias's shoulder. The gesture was simple, yet extraordinary. Years of survival, of wild independence, seemed to soften in this quiet act of trust. Elias placed a hand lightly atop the lion's mane, feeling the coarse texture beneath his fingers. The animal's warmth radiated steadily, a constant in the ebbing light. Around them, the world carried on, the river's gentle murmur, the distant rustle of leaves, and the faint hum of insects preparing for nightfall. Yet in this small clearing, time contracted, drawing all attention to the single bond between man and beast. "You've come, just to be here," Elias whispered, voice fragile but steady. The lion's eyes, deep amber and unyielding in their clarity, met his gaze. A low rumble vibrated through its chest, resonating with a loyalty that had grown over decades. It was not an act of obedience but of understanding, a silent acknowledgement that their lives were intertwined in ways words could never capture. The lion's massive paw nudged his hand, a subtle, deliberate gesture. It was a communication born of instinct and experience, a demonstration of trust, respect, and perhaps even gratitude. Elias exhaled slowly, absorbing the moment, understanding the rarity of this intimacy. To see a creature of such power and independence show vulnerability was both humbling and profound. The air was filled with the scent of wet earth and the lingering warmth of the sun, mingling with the faint musky aroma of the lion. Elias noticed the subtle rise and fall of its chest, the small flicks of its ears, the way its eyes softened when it met his gaze. Every detail was amplified in the fading light, painting a vivid picture of connection and shared history. For a long stretch, they remained still, breathing in unison. Elias felt a quiet, almost reverential peace settle over him. The lion's presence, steady and unflinching, was a reminder of loyalty that existed beyond words, beyond obligation, beyond human understanding. It was a gift, rare and uncompromising in its honesty. Around them, the savannah shifted subtly with approaching night. Shadows lengthened, colors deepened, and a faint wind stirred the grasses. Yet within this pocket of time, nothing else mattered. The lion's head remained lightly against Elias's shoulder, and in that contact, a silent narrative unfolded, one of years, of survival, of shared vulnerability. Elias closed his eyes briefly, allowing himself to absorb the warmth and weight of the moment. The lion's rumble continued softly, a rhythmic pulse that mirrored the quiet beat of his own heart. Here, in the dwindling light, he felt a profound sense of gratitude, not only for the loyalty shown but for the privilege of witnessing it firsthand. This act of trust, so subtle and deliberate, spoke louder than any words could. The lion had chosen to be near him, to offer presence when presence was all that was needed. It was a gesture that transcended language, a bridge between two beings from entirely different worlds yet bound by an unspoken understanding. As the sun dipped lower, Elias leaned slightly, resting against the lion's mane, and let the moment settle into memory. This gift, this rare act of devotion, was theirs alone, a quiet testament to the power of trust, compassion, and the profound connections that can form when two lives intersect in quiet acknowledgement. Night settled slowly over the savannah, the sky a deep indigo streaked with distant stars. The river reflected the soft shimmer, casting a muted glow across the clearing. Elias lay reclined against the log, the lion resting its massive head near his shoulder, steady and calm. The subtle rhythm of its breathing echoed the fading heartbeat of the man who had spent his life among these lands. In the distance, faint rustlings signaled the approach of the pride. They paused at the clearing's edge, silent observers to this intimate scene. Heads lowered, eyes attentive, their presence was respectful, patient. No growls, no challenge, only quiet acknowledgement. The lion at Elias's side lifted its head slightly, scanning the faces of kin before returning its gaze to him, ensuring that his final moments were shared with familiarity and trust. The wind carried the mingled scents of wet earth, grass, and river water. Fireflies flickered near the water's edge, tiny bursts of light illuminating the clearing with ephemeral grace. Elias felt the weight of the years in his chest, the gentle pull of life's end drawing him closer to stillness. He exhaled softly, lips parting in a faint whisper, "Thank you for being here." The lion's low rumble responded, deep and resonant, a sound that seemed to wrap around him, comforting and enduring. The pride lingered for a while, silent witnesses to the bond between man and beast. Then, as if acknowledging the inevitability of time, they began to move back toward the forest, leaving the riverbank and its solemn vigil behind. The lion remained briefly, a sentinel over the life it had come to honor, until the first pale fingers of dawn began to stretch across the horizon. With deliberate care, it rose, stretching each powerful limb, muscles flexing under golden fur. Its eyes lingered on the spot where Elias had rested, a final glance that carried memory, respect, and loyalty. The soft rumble that had accompanied his presence continued for a few moments before fading as it turned toward the open savanna, moving with quiet purpose. The river sparkled under the rising sun, reflecting the gentle hues of morning, the promise of continuity even as one life ended. The lion paused briefly at the water's edge, dipping a paw in, then lifted its head, nostrils flaring, taking in the scents that spoke of home, history, and human presence now gone. With long, deliberate strides, it disappeared into the wilderness, leaving behind only the memory of a bond that had transcended species, time, and instinct. The forest awoke gradually. Birds called, leaves rustled, and the river continued its endless journey, carrying the echoes of what had transpired. Elias's absence was felt, yet in the clearing, the traces of their shared presence remained, imprints in the earth, the gentle curve of his resting spot, the lingering warmth of the lion's vigil. This final act, quiet and deliberate, left no fanfare. No drama, no forced heroics, only the truth of connection, loyalty, and understanding. The lion's return had been a gift, a silent acknowledgement of life's fragile beauty. And though Elias was gone, the memory of this vigil, this extraordinary meeting of human and wild, would endure, as timeless and steadfast as the river flowing past the clearing.